Hello, everyone, and welcome to a new episode of the Uplink podcast. Today, I'm talking to Tia Robinson, co founder and CEO of Expath. Expath is one of our partners from Uplink, and they provide global mobility and language trainings to startups and companies. We have a great selection of topics today, and we're trying to cover most aspects of hiring talented people worldwide, such as how companies, for example, can make it as easy as possible for new employees to settle down. We talk about some bureaucratic obstacles in Germany and also about some best practices. Tia, I'm super excited to have you here today.
Yeah,
Maybe
thanks.
before we dive into the hot topics, you can shortly introduce yourself and tell us a bit more about Expert.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm really excited to be here too. So my name is Tia, and you might be able to hear from my accent. I'm not originally German. I come from Ohio in the US, and my first year in Berlin was pretty rough. I moved here with no work permit and no job lined up. I was staying in a friend's dad's free apartment in Lichtenberg, so way out in the east of Berlin, and living off of savings. And then I found a part time job offer and promptly got rejected for my first work permit because I didn't realize you can't get a work permit for a part time employment offer because it's not enough to live off of. And I thought, why? What am I doing wrong? Why Germany? I just want to work here and pay taxes and be a good, German resident. And yeah, it was very confusing. I didn't know very much about the process, and I found that everywhere I looked for information online on the internet, I found a lot of different advice, tips and tricks, blog articles about how I got my work permit, but a lot of it didn't apply to me, or I didn't know, is it old, or who's writing this blog article? Are they a reliable person? And there was really just this lack of information. A lot of information I could find was very scary. Like, there's already plenty of Americans in Berlin. You'll never get a work permit. We don't want you here. So my first year was just very, very, very rough. And what I saw, though, right away, even in my first weeks in Berlin, there were plenty of other Americans working here. And I thought, okay, there's a big gap between whatever I'm reading online. And I mean, obviously, these Americans found a way to get a work permit and stay here. So I must be able to too. I just have to figure out how it works. And I was really lucky. I got my dream job, a full time job managing a language school, about 1 year in to my stay in Germany. And then I was responsible with the Expath co-founder Stefan Brenner for all the language teachers Germany wide. They were all freelancers, freelance language teachers all over Germany, and they would come to us all the time and ask the same questions I had when I got started. How do I get a work permit? What is this letter from the pension insurance? Do I have to pay something? We realized we couldn't really help them because we weren't their employer. They were all freelancers and they sort of needed to figure things out on their own. We couldn't register them for health insurance, for example. And also, B, they didn't really speak German. And therefore, they couldn't just telephone easily and ask a question to the Rentenversicherung or something like that. And so when Stefan and it was time for us to start our own language school, we thought about making just a general English language school in Berlin, but we decided, no, what Berlin really needs is a place that has really good and affordable German classes for people like our freelance teachers who are really stuck. They have a very low budget. They can't afford to have very expensive language classes at Goethe or something. And then we want to also really enable them to understand all of their bureaucratic problems. And I think the two go hand in hand. They did from the very beginning when the company started, and still today, we're doing both global mobility, so the immigration and relocation side of things, getting the people here, getting them the official work permit so they can work, and then also learning German. That's a
That's
little bit
amazing.
about the company history. It's a long story, but it's a story that makes me happy because it's also partly my story.
Absolutely. And I think especially like when it comes to the language classes and stuff is something that many people can obviously relate. I have many friends. I mean, within Europe, it's quite easy to just move to a new country, but often it's that stage of life after after the studies and stuff where you're not yet completely settled in the job, where you feel like, okay, now I can still go to another country and explore everything, but your budget, of course, might be different than someone who is 40 and already worked 10 years in a management position and then can just figure everything out by services that are already available when it comes to that.
Yeah. And especially in Berlin, people can theoretically survive in Berlin only speaking English and
Yeah,
not really interacting in German. However, I think, why would you really want to? There are always places in your everyday life where German is so helpful at the bakery or in a taxi and all of those like everyday places. You can't just kind of find a workaround for in your everyday life. So a lot of our clients they speak English at work. English is the language of the workplace for
yeah.
almost all of our clients because they're tech companies and startups. But people need German for their lives outside of work.
Absolutely. And the people are super willing to speak German. Sometimes in Berlin, I also observed like the way around that people are starting to actually want to use German and then the bartender or something switch immediately to English. But most of the people, they really want to practice their German in all their life, which is great, I think. When we
Yeah.
now jump a bit more to the sides of companies, you're already saying like you're mostly supporting startups and tech companies,
Mm.
of course, where the working language are English. When it comes to relocation assistance to new employees,
Mm.
something that companies should offer, what are like the main benefits for company offering
Mm.
that whole concept of you can apply from everywhere, no matter where you are right now?
Mm. So I think the first thing is that moving to a new country comes with so many, mental stressors, so much mental effort. And then when people are quite worried about where am I going to be staying, they're going to be distracted from their job, wanting to go home every night and work on their flat search and not hang out with new colleagues, using their lunch break to look for apartments. So I think, firstly, providing a lot of support to new employees can really help them focus on their jobs, focus on having time to get to know their new colleagues. They can, work with a little bit fewer distractions, hopefully, and get onboarded better without having to have some of those existential worries of where am I going to be staying in a month. So that's one thing. And I think also it really helps with retention because when people do feel that they've been able to settle in well, they found an apartment they can afford and live with, their child is in daycare, their spouse is happy, making friends or working. Then they will be happy to stay longer. And when those things don't happen, people leave after 9 months or 12 months. And definitely at Expath, we've seen people that we've both relocated. And then 9 months later, we are helping them move away from Germany again,
Mm.
letting the immigration office know, oh, this person is leaving the company now. And I think it's often because they just didn't quite get settled. Something didn't work right in their first months to make them really feel at home here. So I think retention also is definitely improved when people are able to get more easily into their job, into life in Germany. And I think the third thing is just that it's kind of expected now, especially by tech talents. If there's war on talent, potential employees are going to be looking very closely at which company offers what type of support to get me where. Germany is an immensely attractive country for people to move to because of the really good social system, because you can get permanent residency relatively fast if you have a blue card. It's a very child friendly country, so it's super duper attractive. And I think it's almost like a given that companies offer this kind of relocation support, relocation budget to employees. So it's definitely something they would ask about in an interview or kind of expect a company to do to help them get a visa, for example.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think it's also super important that they, of course, highlight that also from like a marketing perspective, because I even we working with startups ourselves, often when you talk to them, they say, it's no problem. We can make a lot of things happening. But then you look at the career portal or something and it's not really advertised that they're offering all
Yeah.
this great support and they're willing to do so. And for me, like as an applicant, when you apply, especially really abroad, let's say overseas for a position, you feel already like much more comfortable when you see, okay, that will be the first steps. I maybe have already a flat for the first 3 months or something where they can help. And I
Mm.
think nowadays, even more what we develop on the market, there's so much more solutions where you can simply book a furnished flat or something with some portals or agencies. So if, as an employee, I think when you collaborate with them, you have like great options to make that happen, especially in cities like Berlin or all big cities around Europe where it's quite tough to find a super suitable flat when you have a few boxes to check, like a daycare close by or something like that.
Totally. I was just at a conference for relocation industry in Dublin,
Hmm.
Ireland, last month. I found out that the flat situation in Dublin is just as bad or even worse
Yeah,
than Berlin. So there are other places in Europe as well. And I think it's very, city dependent or regional. To what degree is it really difficult to find an apartment? For sure, Berlin is very, very challenging.
absolutely. I can totally, yeah, they say the same about Dublin because I had a friend who moved there and she needed to make some application calls there.
Yeah.
And I think she ended up staying like 40 kilometers away from Dublin, paying like 180 pounds for a shared room somewhere. So it was really crazy when I heard that. It's like so much cost you have to calculate in advance. And
Yeah.
totally need for that. In general, when companies they are like willing to do willing to support employees with that, how much time should they
Mm,
calculate if they want to especially recruit outside the EU? Because I can imagine, especially you were already saying like if you have a family or something, you rent a house somewhere, you may have a longer notice period. I don't know how that
mhm,
actually works in other countries like the US, for example. How much time passes from the
mm.
decision, okay, we want to hire you, till the first day in the office?
So it depends a lot on where you are in the world,
Hmm.
where the non-EU person is living, what is their nationality, and this is where it gets really interesting because there's sometimes feels like there's very little standardization and how it works to get a visa around the world. You go to the German embassy in the country you're living in, but they all have very different turnaround times. Sometimes they have different paperwork that's required here or there. So on average, we know it takes 84 days
Hmm.
from the time you get the contract or start to do the visa process until you actually get the visa in your hands. But the variation is really big. So in the quickest case, it could be, 3, 4 weeks, and the longest case can be well over a year
Hmm.
for you to get the visa and be able to move to Germany, which is really not good. That's really problematic. And the immigration lawyer that we work with that trains my team said, in some cases, it's actually wished that it is this way for different political reasons. For example, a certain country might be facing really bad brain drain. They make agreement with the German government that only so and so many visas will be issued for people to leave the country. So, sometimes there are artificial bottlenecks as well as real bottlenecks that we saw, for example, during COVID or when there's just horrible staffing shortage at an embassy and they really can only process this many. So all kinds of things are happening around the world at the different German embassies that issue visas. And it's one advantage in working with a global mobility partner, I think, is that they can give you good, accurate information on what is it looking like right now in this country. But it also changes over time. So I remember in particular, Serbia was way over a year.
Hmm.
A couple years back to get a visa from there. Now the situation seems much better. So,
Hmm.
year to year, it can also change in a
Yeah.
particular country. So Yeah, that's one thing about the process. Another thing is the German government has sort of recognized that it's crazy to take a year to get someone a visa to move here
Absolutely.
for a job. Not that many companies are happy to wait that long. So they did create something called the fast track
Hmm.
process. A few years ago, right at the start of COVID, it was launched. And that is aimed at making the process, instead of maybe a year in some cases, more like 3 to 6 months
Hmm.
for
Cool.
countries which have a really crazy long wait time. So that's something you have to pay extra for. And we, for our clients, will let them know, okay, look, this person is in country X. Right now, it's a country that takes 9 to 12 months. It makes sense to book this fast track. So I think the German government is aware of the situation, and yet still, for some countries, it's very difficult.
Yeah, yeah. And I think as
Mm.
well that it's the bottleneck is not, sometimes it has political reasons or something
Mm.
to like to overextend it in certain countries. I know, for example, like that in Brazil, it also can take up to 1 year to get a visa
Mm.
for the USA, even if you already have like an employee wants to go to hire you. In 1 year is crazy long sometimes in the short recruiting
Yeah.
processes, but also the other hand, it's so worth it when there are processes to speed it up and stuff, because often we talk about like really high qualified talent and stuff. And when
Hmm.
someone is looking for like
Mm.
a manager, I don't know, a CEO or something, and they found the perfect candidate, it would be such a pity to not hire them because they have to wait 6 months, right?
Indeed. And if you have that perfect candidate, they also might not be willing to wait 6 months for a visa.
Absolutely.
You may
Of
lose
course.
them to a company in a different country where the turnaround time is a lot quicker.
Mhm.
Or, yeah, they choose a different EU country because it's going to go faster there. I heard the US is also terrible. That's where I'm from.
Mhm.
That's what Germans always tell me. Anytime I tell them how long it takes in Germany, they are like, yeah, but the US is much worse. Like, I
Okay.
don't know. I don't know how it works in the US. Actually, only know this
Mhm.
direction.
Yeah,
But yeah, I can say, as a person having been through the German immigration system, even if you speak German, even if you have an advanced degree and a job offer and a decent salary, it's still not easy.
yeah,
And from the US, it's considered one of the eight friends countries, a country with reciprocal positive immigration agreement with Germany and the US. It's still not easy.
absolutely.
So it's sometimes very surprising to Germans. They're really surprised that it should be such a challenge to get here from the immigration standpoint.
I think as soon as you start dealing a bit more with German bureaucracy, you see that there are many obstacles. Because I know when you never have, when you just need like your travel ID, your personal ID, you know kind of how that works. Me, for example, I just like declared to be a part-time freelancer, so
Mm.
Gewerbentreibender, and I really spend like 3 hours watching tutorials, etc., to get if I'm a freelancer, if I'm a Gewerbetreibender, what should I have to do, and this is all in like such a bureaucratic German that even as a native speaker, it's not easy to just
Yeah.
fill that document and know what you have to do. And I can imagine when it comes to these things, it gets really really complicated.
Yeah, definitely.
Absolutely. But not just like time wise. I mean, for companies as well, they're also calculating, obviously, if it makes sense to recruit in certain countries. You already said there is like this possibility of a shortcut to speed things up if you
Mhm.
really want someone in general. What extra costs as a company I should
Yeah.
be aware of?
Yeah. So the actual fee to the German government for getting a visa, and then the
Hmm.
second step, getting a work permit once you're here in Germany, is
Hmm.
not that much compared to some other countries. It might be around 400 euros.
Okay.
If your candidate also has to do the degree recognition process. So that's actually not a crazy high amount. And then the fast track, if you book that on top, at least in Berlin, I believe it's 411 euros per
Okay.
adult person. So your employee and their spouse, and then half of that for every child that you might pay on top for that fast track process. compared to other countries, I think like the UK, for example, it's not actually that expensive. I think the time is actually the bigger hurdle for a lot of companies.
Absolutely. And I mean, like 800 euros or for a family, 2000
Yeah.
comparing to an average salary a year, which is around 45 or 50K. I don't know the exact number, should be totally
Yeah.
adequate.
Yeah.
One, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. No, I was just gonna say, this is the fee to the government for actually helping your candidate get the documents they need to start working. But then beyond that, companies can and do offer a very wide range of other relocation support. So that could be anything between 500 euros and 5,000 euros or 10,000 euros. If it's a executive you have relocating from Australia with their family and they're going to ship their household goods from Australia, the relocation bonus that you might need to pay could actually be quite high. So, yeah, it kind of depends on the company's individual budget. It's often a little bit different, for junior roles, for moves within the EU, for moves outside of the EU, for more senior roles, or maybe people with children. So all of this, makes a difference as well. But just to give a few examples, booking a temporary furnished flat for a new hire in Berlin right now is something that we really strongly recommend companies to do for at least the first month. That is going to be around 1,200, 2,000 euros a month, even for a not huge and fancy place.
Yeah.
Um, 2 months or 3 months is even nicer. We have some companies, where the company pays for the first month and the employee pays for month two themselves. Other companies just give out the lump sum as a total amount relocation bonus, and then the new hire will choose whatever they want to do with that. So I think that the short-term furnished apartment is really, really essential, honestly, thing to offer your new hires, because they need a secure place where they can register their address. They can feel safe. The first month is going to take them so long to find an apartment. So they need to like buy a little time, in a temporary place. And then yeah, for other things like settling in service, Expath has everything from like 49 € do-it-yourself package, where we just have really good guides, digitized guides online of exactly what you need to do, step by step, with useful checklists, really for do-it-yourselfers, all the way to the package we usually offer for people coming with kids is 20 hours of relocation support. They can use it for things like looking for a long-term apartment or looking for Kitas, daycare for their kids. That's like 1,600 euros. So that's kind of the range of different types of relocation packages a company could offer.
hmm Amazing. And I think also probably giving like certain information in advance to that it becomes so mandatory, because what just right now
Mm,
plopped in my head that if you're a family with three children, you probably don't know that in some countries of Germany, daycare is paid. In other countries, you have to
mm.
pay it completely by yourself, matter if you're in Berlin, Munich, or Frankfurt. I know which rules apply to what part of Germany exactly, but I know that there are great differences. And I have also foreign friends who lived in Berlin a long time, then they moved and they were super surprised. Now, all of the sudden, I have to pay for daycare because it's sometimes still a bit fragmented, right?
Yeah. Yeah. In Berlin, it's almost free. You just
Yeah.
have to pay the kind of monthly food costs. It's
Yeah, right.
totally incredible. But I have a friend living in Munich too, and I know there it's very different situation.
Exactly. So
Mm.
one other questions. Nowadays, company work more and more remotely, or also like completely remotely. Wouldn't it be
Mm.
an option for companies as well to simply hire people abroad and integrate them to the company culture instead of completely relocating them? I mean, of course, it depends a lot on the time zone. Relocating I know integrating someone in the team from Australia in an operative role might be quite hard. But for example,
Mhm.
thinking about countries like Brazil, where sometimes it's just 5 hours, they could start at 6 and work a bit
Mhm.
longer. Wouldn't that be an option as well?
Mhm. Yeah, I think many companies are offering this, and we saw it increase a lot during COVID. Obviously, because companies had to do it. The embassies were shut all around the world, and nobody was getting a visa
Okay.
from Brazil, from India to come to Germany. And I think many companies did, because of the situation, let people start working from there. Often with the intent to bring them later to Germany. So we did during COVID get a lot of questions from companies about, can I have a remote employee? How does that work? I know also in the last few years, many other companies have sprung up to help companies manage the legal and compliance side of having employees based around the world. So
Mhm.
if you wanted to do that, I think their name of some of the companies like that, one is called Remote and one is called Boundless, but there are others as well. They can act as an employer of record in a particular country that you aren't in. So say your company is in Germany, but you have somebody who is in France and they want to get hired as an employee in France and they need a work permit or they need to sign up for the French employment system. So you can work with one of these companies as well to do that in other countries you aren't based in with your
Mhm.
company. I know this works too. Or working, with freelancers in other countries, maybe a lot more flexible than hiring employees in other countries. And this type of bureaucratic thing is definitely like something really you have to kind of figure out and research in the beginning. What legal obligations do you have to cover people's pension or health insurance if you have them as an employee and they live in the US or in Brazil? That is actually something Expath can't answer, but companies like Remote or Boundless would support with this topic. I can say from personal experience, we do have a couple of remote employees working from other cities in Germany, and I miss them. They don't get to come to the office like other employees, for a happy hour. I see them once a year, which is really nice. But I really like seeing people on a regular basis in the office. I mean, we didn't implement a particular number of days per week people need to come back in. But I think that the company culture, if you have a good one, the company culture encourages people to be together and, enjoy each other's company. And sometimes I think it's a shame that those people can't join in more often. So I don't know. It makes me personally a little sad. I'd love to see them a lot more. So it might, in the long run, maybe have some kind of impact on company culture and the ability of people to equally participate in regular events.
Exactly. That's also like two things. I think that's really important what you said when it comes to this cultural aspect, because I think it's a big. I work completely remotely. For example, we come together every 3 months, but it was a decision I made. We said we're working remotely, and people who
Mm-hmm.
work remote who really want to work remote for certain reasons, it's different than people who
Mm-hmm.
it should not be feel like a choice B, right? So you can't come and be part of our team and anything, and maybe we are having a hybrid model anyways. Now you can
Mm-hmm.
work remote from there. I think that's something companies should be really aware of and push it
Yeah.
into a certain direction how they want to manage it, because
We've
that's
done
something.
it.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. We've done it for like people who just absolutely had the skill set we needed
Hmm.
and they
Sure.
happened to be living in a different city in Germany and not able to relocate. We didn't want to miss out on this incredible talented person, Sharo, our accounting manager. We really need her. So, we were very happy to have her also remotely. What we've done for the whole company, because most of us are here in Berlin, we made the ability that people can go work from anywhere they want for like 2 months a year. And this way, some people get the feeling of remote
Hmm.
working. They can, go to different places in the world. In Berlin in the winter, they can get out of there. As long as the time zone thing can work out, plus or minus a few hours difference, we're happy to let people travel. Yeah, and I think this is also a really nice thing to offer.
Absolutely, absolutely. The flexibility, I mean, increased a lot, especially
Mm.
like in the new generations, right? So I have another question. We were talking already about a bit about that, but when I'm like willing to hire worldwide, where can I get actually some, yeah, some help when it comes to all the visa issues and immigration
Mm.
regulations? Is it often so, from your experience, that company says we are hiring in that and that and that countries, or it's really they're hiring worldwide? Because often when I check portals sometimes, or seeing things, it's often American only, or just we can just consider that in certain countries
Mm.
due to reasons. And it's kind of a pity if you don't live in that country and you see like this job advertisements, be like, ah, damn, I wish I would be living in the neighbor country or something, which is a pity, right? But is it
Yeah.
due to the regulations?
I don't believe so.
Hmm.
To be honest, I don't know what the laws are like in Germany on whether or not you can exclude people from particular countries for different jobs. I don't know. If, for example, you're allowed to say we only want applicants from North and South America, and we wouldn't consider people from other parts of the world, it might be illegal in Germany. I don't know. What I do see here sometimes is that companies are only able to hire people with European nationality or who already have a work permit. And this would be because that company can't sponsor a work permit for that particular role. Like maybe the salary is too low, or maybe it is not a strictly skilled professional occupation. Like could be a position in a call center is not something you could hire an American or an Indian
Hmm.
for and bring them here to Germany. It's something you could relatively easily find a European worker to do this kind of
Hmm.
position. You don't have a university degree and working in a call center. So it's not something a company could sponsor a work permit for, really. So you do see this sometimes in job ads here. But from what I know from our
In
clients, they want the best employees from anywhere in the world, and they will wait a year for them. So even the countries where it takes a year or longer to get a visa, most of our clients are willing to wait for that person to get the permit, even if it's quite a long wait. And right now, over 50% of the people we are helping get permits and move to Germany are from India, which I find really interesting. It's changed a lot over time.
Mhm.
When we first started almost 11 years ago, the proportion was very different. Yeah, but there's just huge proportion of people coming from India right now. So I think companies are really willing to look to all corners of the world for the right employees.
That's amazing. I also have to specify here in job ads in general, I was seeing they're applying. They're just looking in certain countries. It's a big list
Mm.
of countries, but sometimes they're really determined about
Yeah.
the countries. And I can't say per se that they were like German employees. Might be
Hmm.
also
Hmm.
employees in companies who sit
Hmm.
somewhere else. Just to be clear.
Yeah. The other thing that job ads are allowed to say, of course, they're allowed to say they
Mhm.
want someone who speaks this and that language.
Obviously,
So,
right?
if you have a call center for Norway, it's reasonable to say we need someone who has native level of Norwegian. So that is also, possible when it's a requirement for the position.
Obviously,
Yeah.
obviously.
Mm.
We all already talked a bit about the obstacles in like bureaucratic matters in
Mm.
Germany. Do you feel it is in Germany especially harsh? I've already figured out a bit. In other countries, it's kind of the same. But
Mm.
is there, for example, a best practice you have in mind, like a country who is doing super great when it comes to that? Or
Yeah.
is it more or less the same?
Yeah, so I will be honest that I am not an expert in immigration in any other country besides Germany. And yet I hear different stories from,
Hmm.
global mobility contacts that I have or our immigration lawyer on how other countries are doing it. And I think compared to Germany, what I can say about Germany is that it is very far behind in digitizing bureaucratic processes. Other countries like the UK do have the ability to take applications online, for example. Now when you open a bank account, you have this post ident or like ID process where you have to have your ID and you turn it this way and that way, and someone's really verifying your identity this way. I don't understand why something like that isn't possible to do as well with the visa appointments, for example. And other countries really are just doing, I think, a better job giving information digitally, enabling appointments to be booked digitally, enabling applications to be received digitally, sharing information from one government office to another internally digitally as well. So I think Germany also, they're really strict about who they let in, and you all the time reading about Germany's need for talent and labor shortages, especially for things like healthcare as the German population ages, and yet the immigration system doesn't feel very accessible to many people. If you don't have a lawyer or you're not going through some kind of agency that will help you with all of the immigration and paperwork, or your company isn't doing it for you, it's quite burdensome. In Germany, for example, there's a huge preference for people with university degrees. If you are more like a casual worker in a restaurant, cafe, something like that, you just want to be, a freelance babysitter or caregiver, getting a work permit is quite hard. There's one kind of permit that allows you to come here and look for a job for 6 months, but you need to have a university degree, recognized university degree in the German system in order to qualify. On the other hand, I saw recently that the UK has 7 different types of permits for people who don't yet have a job offer to go to the UK and look for a job. They also have 8 kinds of permits that let you live in the UK and work for an overseas company, which is another thing that is very, very rare in Germany. So there's no kind of, digital nomad permit for Germany. And other EU countries are starting to introduce this. So I think this is going to detract people from wanting to move to Germany, possibly.
Absolutely. And I think they just need to, because when I hear this story sometimes, from my work, I'm dealing with like public bids and tenders when it comes to that, obviously in the field of IT freelancing. And there it's still the case that they need to have a master degree, no matter if they worked as, for example, as a CTO for 25 years, let's say, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I
Mm-hmm.
think especially nowadays, how also work changed and stuff. Of course, it's good to have a degree when you're a doctor and stuff, and you maybe need to go in like further education or something for two
Yeah.
more years when you work in another country. But when it comes to so many roles, they are not, you can't say like high talent or very talented people are the ones with a university degree when they have
Mm-hmm.
amazing
Mm-hmm.
experience and stuff. In the
Mm-hmm.
field of IT, for example, it's something where it's really not the case. I know many, many super successful freelancers who don't have a degree, and no one cares about that because they can code,
Mm-hmm.
they can build infrastructures and stuff like that, right? So
There
they
is
should be
now a
aware of
permit
that.
in Germany for people who are considered specialists, where if you
Hmm.
have so and so many years of relevant work experience in the last 7 years, then you can qualify. So, there are sometimes
Hmm.
workarounds, or this is specifically for IT people. Then the government will
Yeah.
realize, oh, here's a group of people who don't always have a degree. We need to somehow create a way for them to get in. But it feels very, very selective.
Hmm. I
And
get that.
yeah, I don't know. I personally would love to see Germany open up even more than it has already.
Yeah, on a personal level, I can also totally agree to that because I think it's especially for Germany, from my point of view, it's super important to also attract young talent and stuff. And there might not be, and not just people, of course, who are like experienced with a record of experience, because maybe they come to Germany, they really want to find a job and be there and work and stuff. And they should be also able to build their career in a country as Germany, especially because we can provide like so really great company structures and stuff like that. So I think it's
Mm,
also good to open much more and not only attract like super high qualified talent, as you said, like super experts for leading roles and stuff, and open up
Mhm.
more a bit in general. But that's my
Mhm.
personal opinion, my take on that, of course.
In good news, if you are a company owner or someone starting a startup or something like that, it's likely going to be those tech people that you're bringing from overseas. That's also like 95% of the
Mhm,
employees that we're helping come over. And they do right now at the moment have it a little bit easier when it comes to getting a visa and getting into
mhm,
Germany, because it is widely recognized that there's a lack of IT talent here, software developers and programmers, and it's considered one of the shortage occupations in
mhm,
Germany. So people with any IT degree, IT relevant professional jobs,
mhm,
they are gonna find it a little easier perhaps
mhm.
than people with other professions.
I get it. So maybe you gave already to us so much advice and many great insight. When you could like identify from your experience working with companies, like
Mm.
three best practices or three tips you could give to companies to really make all that processes happen, what would it be?
Yeah, so I think the first one really has to do with expectations management, which I feel like sometimes is the actual service that we're doing every day here at Expath. Because no matter what it is someone has
Mhm,
booked, they really need to understand, how long is this going to take? What is the scope of what another company like Expath or your employer company can do, and what are you going to have to do by yourself? How easy or hard might it be? What is your first month or two in Berlin going to look like? What challenges will you face? I think being upfront about those things so that people are not scared away, but they have more realistic expectations is really, really important. And we have definitely worked with clients in the past, not our current client anymore, where recruiters were telling candidates anything and everything to get them to sign with the company. And they absolutely were not telling any of the hard parts. And, they were telling people that it's still like cheap and easy to get an apartment in Berlin, which is not the case. And man, they really set those people up for a lot of disappointment then when they moved here and found that the reality was totally different. So I think this is the first thing. And I think there is a nice way to do it where you are honest with people about how long things might take, but we're here to help you with every step along the way. That won't stop people from taking the job offer. Then I think that the next thing that companies really need to understand right now is the impact that the flats crisis is having in cities like Berlin, maybe other cities like Dublin as well. And I've heard Munich and Hamburg aren't that great either. But in Berlin in particular, there truly is a flats crisis. And for this situation, I think that I would recommend a best practice of paying at least 1 month in a short-term furnished accommodation where people can register their address, but better is 2 or 3 months in order to buy this person time to look for something suitable and affordable for the long term, because it can take months. And for companies who are willing to support people with the long-term flat search, this is where Expath really can be helpful in hooking them up with a coach who's really there like every step of the way with their long-term flat search so that they can find something. Because, having a home is like that bottom layer of the pyramid of people's needs. And until people feel like they have, a long-term place to stay, it can really cause a lot of stress and uncertainty in their lives. So I think this is number two of things a company needs to be willing to do for the international employees. And I think that the last thing is more just a kind of a general expectation that employees have nowadays, which is that the onboarding process or the information they receive needs to be digital, easily available when and where they need it, accessible from their phone, that they've got like a lot of information at their fingertips when they want to have it. So for Expath, this has meant having a digital platform where we manage all the immigration and relocation steps, where someone can access it from their phone or from a computer and see, okay, what is the exact next step that I need to do? HRs can look at the platform and see where in the process someone is. Okay, my person has a visa. Now I know they'll be moving to Berlin and starting next week. Okay, and I can see they have a coach who's going to help them with XYZ. So I think this is kind of a really almost expectation or must have nowadays. And companies are solving it in different ways as well. I know some of our clients have like an internal wiki that has all this information that employees can access even before they officially come to the company. Like, what is your onboarding journey going to look like? Yeah. So for companies that maybe don't have that level of ready information on an easy platform, it's something that we offer as well.
Amazing. And I know we do love a good checklist when it comes especially to these topics, I think. And
Yeah.
one idea I also had in mind from the aspect of like being a community builder, also like connecting when you're like a large company already, connecting people in advance with people who've been through the same process and
Yeah.
stuff. And I think the main thing, the expectation management is so important, because I think I can't imagine how it must feel moving to like a city or country being promised that and that, and then you realize also like the life cost might be like significantly higher that you imagined,
Yeah.
and you're there with the family now, and now
Yeah.
you need to pay out of need 2,500 euro for a flat where you had calculated a budget which is way
Totally.
less, right? It's
Well, I can give you an example, true example from last
Mhm.
year. That was a very extreme example. Someone came, a guy came with an employment offer from a company with 6 children and a
Mhm.
pregnant wife.
Oh.
And his salary was, fixed at the company. They couldn't really offer more. He got a visa to come here, no worries. They had a temporary accommodation. We're really finding it absolutely impossible to find an apartment because in Germany there are laws about how much square meters you have to have per person
Mhm.
living in your apartment. And even though it was cool with him if 4 of his kids shared a bedroom, it was not okay with landlords, and it wasn't okay with the immigration office.
Mhm.
And even though he had a visa to come, he got rejected for his work permit. They would not give him like the blue card he was supposed to get because they said his salary wasn't high enough to support a family of 8 going on 9. And the company
Crazy.
refused to budge on the salary. And I think, this is a kind of a crazy example. It's only happened once in the company history, but things like this sometimes pop up. And then I think as well, if you're going to commit to bringing someone here with their 6 children and pregnant spouse, I mean, you have to be able to see that stuff
Absolutely.
through. You can't let somebody get here, and then not pay them another 2,000 euros a month so they can get their work permit. But in the end, they were very fortunate and found a very large and cheap apartment way, 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 way far outside of the city center. And they did indeed get the permit in the end. But it took months and months and months to resolve the situation. So that is, I guess one example of the kind of commitment that companies might need to have, or flexibility, I guess.
Absolutely, and be aware of that, because it does not seem to be a surprise that there are more, that he has more children than just one, right? I mean, this was not
It was a
more than
very
that with
unique
that
situation.
information. Crazy,
Yeah.
crazy.
But maybe one more example that companies often totally don't think about, totally neglect to tell people about, in Berlin at least, is the Kita shortage. So childcare, daycare for kids who are aged usually 1 to 6. Um, it's free-ish in Berlin, but the waiting lists are so long that it also, like the flat situation, is truly a crisis. And if you've got, 2 parents who are planning on working full time as soon as they get to Berlin, it's not going to work. And there are many companies, that make this part also sound totally easy peasy, or just, definitely don't say anything about it. And then someone comes, spouse A has a new job at the company. Spouse B plans on keeping their US or Canadian job full time, working from the third day that they move over here. What are they going to do with their kids? Somebody is going to have to not work for, 3 to 6 months, and people haven't planned for that. And that is really a bad surprise to find out after you've already moved to Berlin with your family. And
Absolutely.
indeed, in one case, we even had a single mother, like this person was the person hired by the company, with a very good salary, no issues with immigration, but she arrived with 3 very small children and zero childcare, and she couldn't start. Like, she literally couldn't start the job, even though everything else was fine, because she had no daycare whatsoever. And yeah, I think this is something companies often don't think about, because they maybe think about, okay, we got to do the immigration stuff so they have the papers to work. Okay, we help with the flat search. We know there's a crisis on, but yeah, there are these kind of other, maybe family related situational things that, this is what I meant in the beginning when I said, if you don't take care of those factors, also your employee will not be retained. If their spouse is miserable and their kids are in school, they're not going to stay in Germany for longer than 6 months, a year. Like, that. This is very challenging.
Absolutely. And you, as an applicant, you would probably, when you hear, they have childcare and everything, and it's a good social
Mm-hmm.
system, like the things you hear from Germany, you would not think about there is an endless waiting list or something. But
Mm-hmm.
knowing from friends, I don't know, the baby, before it's born, sometimes they're already on some waiting list, right? And you don't have the chance to do so because mostly you get to know a few months in advance when you're coming, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. With enough planning, this, you can manage people's
Yeah,
expectations on how hard it's going to be. You can help them to coordinate, a part-time babysitter or nanny before they come, so that,
sure.
spouse B, who needs to start working again remote for their US company on day 3, they will be able to do so, as a temporary measure while they're looking for a kita. So there are a lot of things that can be done about the situation, but yeah, just letting someone be surprised is like, whew, this is a really bad start to a new life in Germany
Mhm.
for
So,
those people.
yeah, so
Yeah.
expectation management is definitely key on all levels, I guess. That's probably
Yeah.
the main thing we can say about it. Tia,
Yeah.
thank you so much for your time. I think that would be super, super interesting for everyone to hear, and especially for companies to, like, I don't know, to think about how
Yeah.
to structure the whole service they want to provide and which aspects are relevant in
Yeah.
the end. Thanks so
Thanks.
much.
Yeah, of course. Thanks. It was my pleasure.
Bye.
Bye.